I just now started recording the webinar, so this is new. I'm a little late. Um, but if you have any difficulties during the webinar and you're not able to use the instant messaging box, here's Amy Becker's cell phone number. So you can feel free to call that real quick, and she should be able to troubleshoot what your issues might be. Also, I just wanted to make sure that your mic is muted, and at any point, we are a small group, so we definitely could at some point later in the webinar unmute mics and just have a dialogue if people are interested in doing that. I have some people helping me present today. I'll introduce them as we get to their part of the webinar, and they will also be providing some input into the webinar today. So I'm going to start actually right away by turning the webinar over to Jake, and I'm looking for and Jake is with the Adirondack North Country Association, and I'm going to have Jake just talk a little bit about what ANCA does and a little bit about this particular project. So Jake, are you there?
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can.
Oh, great. Yeah, thanks so much, Lynn, Amy, and team. As Lynn said, I'm Jake Venivalrath from the Adirondack North Country Association, or ANCA. I'm the new Connected Communities Coordinator. And ANCA is the longest-running not-for-profit rural development organization in northern New York. We were formed in 1955 by a group of businessmen and government officials and government leaders, and have since leveraged over tens of millions of dollars bringing into the North Country region. But our main goal is to form partnerships like the partnership that we formed with the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center and the Scenic Byways program to bring those resources in and be able to do great projects like this, which I'm sure Lynn will tell you about now.
All right. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, and so I can share with you a little bit about the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center. And we have been in existence since 2007 and have a statewide presence, and actually have even expanded beyond the state of New York. And we're housed at State University of New York at Cortland, so we're a university-based center. And our mission is to promote inclusive recreation. So in a nutshell, it's to help all people, regardless of their ability level, their size, their shape, play wherever they choose to play. And we have been doing several different activities, and some of our main activities that have promoted this mission has been Inclusion U, which is a training that teaches people how to use the assessment tool, the inclusivity assessment tool that we used actually in this project, which we'll talk about more in a minute. And Inclusion U is a training that provides a foundation of what inclusion is, and then how do I assess it at an agency or a recreation amenity. It has been, since 2007, a face-to-face training. In the last 2 years, we've been piloting the training as an online training. To date, we've had about 300 people go through the online training, and nearly 3,500 go through the face-to-face training. But I'm very excited as we launch it on a new learning management system, and we'll be able to offer it to the general public and any agency that's interested in having their employees or any stakeholders in their agency go through Inclusion U and become a certified inclusivity assessor. It's going to be readily available and very cost efficient in the future. What happens with the information people collect when they do the inclusivity assessment tool is that we enter it into an online recreation database, and that database, we'll talk about more later, provides descriptive and accurate information about what's at a recreation amenity, so that people can look ahead of time or even as they're on the road to a particular recreation site to see, what is there, and how accessible is that recreation amenity for me? So it doesn't give compliance to any kind of standard, but instead gives descriptive information about what's at that agency. And one thing that we've learned as we've done assessments, and Deanna and Mary will be talking in a little bit and can tell you more about this, but as we do assessments at recreation amenities, people ask for help or questions about, well, what could we change, or how could we make that more inclusive or more usable? So as a result of doing the recreation assessment, as we entered into the database, we give a lot of technical assistance to people. And so that's, in a nutshell, what some of our work is. We work a lot with college students in pre-professional parks and recreation programs. So many college students are now graduating with their degrees in parks and recreation, or recreation management, or therapeutic recreation, having learned how to use the inclusivity assessment tool and how to assess for inclusion at a recreation agency. So at this point, I think I'll ask Jake again if he wants to just give a little bit of background on how this project came into being with ANCA, and the sort of the conceptualization of the project. So Jake, if you'd be willing to do that. Are you there, Jake?
Yep, I'm sorry, I had to click unmute there, I guess. Good to me as well. So part of the Scenic Byways program that ANCA is very close in running multiple scenic byways throughout the North Country. Part of what the Department of Transportation and the Scenic Byways Committee wanted to see was improving access throughout the North Country for folks of all abilities. And this was just the ideal partnership, as I mentioned before, that came to be when we were able to connect the resources that were available through the Scenic Byways program directly to the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center. And it's really a passion of ANCA's here in the North Country to bring as many folks up here to be able to enjoy the Adirondacks in the North Country and the beautiful natural resources that we have. So again, thank you for all your hard work on this project.
And Jake, I know you wanted to mention the Diversity Council. Did you want to do that now, or do you want to do that a little later?
Yeah, and actually I think Pete Nelson is actually on the line, so he's probably a better person to be able to speak about that. But I was able to participate in a great conference they had a few weeks back, and great things are happening with inclusivity and accessibility in the North Country, and I think he'd probably be able to talk a little bit more about that.
Okay, maybe near the end of the webinar, we'll just unmute everybody and we could have a dialogue about that. That would be really interesting, and actually will fit in well with sort of talking about future plans and initiatives. So, okay, thanks, Jake. I'm gonna. I think just to follow up with what Jake said is, the Scenic Byways program is really about promoting tourism and bringing visitors to the North Country, and throughout New York State, but in particular we focused on some of the byways in the North Country. And I think when you talk about tourism and you talk about visitors, it's really an economic benefit to a region to grow tourism. And so usability becomes just a critical issue when you look at the statistics on the number of people impacted by variation in their ability level. And so if you look at the latest U.S. Census Bureau, 1 in 5 people in the United States has a disability or have a disability. And in New York State, it's actually slightly higher than that, where nearly 23% of the state population reports having a disability. And another statistic that really compounds that is the rapid rate of growth with older adults. It's the fastest growing segment of the population are those of us 65 and older. And one statistic the U.S. Census Bureau has reported is that 50% of adults over age of 65 report having some kind of a disability. So we're talking about a really large group of people that you really don't want to turn away from your recreation amenities. So it really matters. And I think when you think about that 1 in 5 people, nobody lives in a vacuum. They don't live by themselves or play by themselves. And so when you're talking one person, you're maybe talking 10 people that are impacted because they have, grandchildren and children and friends and family. And if they can't get into the recreation facility and enjoy it and use it, then neither will their family. And so you can see how that can become a lot of people that you're turning away by not being usable and not being welcoming and inclusive. So I think the impact is really large on, the idea of becoming inclusive is the right thing to do, and it's the what a good society does, but it makes a lot of business sense to be inclusive. So this project focused around the Scenic Byway program, and in particular, we looked at 3 scenic byways: the Adirondack, the Central, and the Olympic Scenic Byway. And those were sort of the boundaries or the parameters that we used to decide where we were going to assess and which recreation amenities we would include in the work that we were doing. And so over 2 summers, it was basically summers and some spring and fall work, 4 staff from the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center at varying times were traveling the byways and doing assessments. And I have today Mary Kelly and Deanna Moore are on the call with us, and I asked each of them to talk a little bit about what their experience was like. And so I'm gonna turn it over to you first, Deanna, if that's okay. So I'm gonna unmute you here. So if you're there, Deanna. And Deanna, you might have to unmute yourself. Mm-hmm. I think I hear.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
I saw that it came through that you unmuted me. I didn't realize I had to push a button too.
Well, welcome to our webinar. And I thought maybe I'm going to flip to the next slide that has a few photos. And maybe you could just share, since you and Ben Banker were our assessors the first summer, if you have anything you want to share about the process and what it was like.
So as Lynn just said, Ben and I were the first set of assessors, and you can see the picture of him on the right. That's at High Falls Gorge. We focused on the Olympic Byway and then the northern part of the Adirondack Byway and then the western part of the Central Adirondack Byway. We kept one central location, knowing that there would be a next round of assessors going out, which was Mary and Tyler. So Ben and I basically went all over the place, and we got to see quite a range of facilities. And common throughout all of them was everyone really wanted to know different ways that they could increase the usability of their site, which is great because that was exactly what we were planning on going out there and doing. And there were specific questions that people would ask, such as what types of policies for service animals. And so we got back to them as quick as we could with more information on this is the best way to have a policy and things of that sort.
And then I unmuted you, Mary. If you would want to add, Mary Kelly and Tyler Pearson were the staff who assessed the second summer and beyond that a little bit. So Mary, are you on?
I am. Hi, everybody. I apologize ahead of time. My dog is snoring in the background, so ignore him. So yes, as Deanna and Lynn said, Tyler and I were the second set of assessors. We focused mostly on the southern Adirondacks from Lake George up, kind of working in the opposite direction that Ben and Deanna had. And one of the things that I always find really interesting was we always were asked about bathrooms and how bathrooms could be more usable to people. I've found that a lot of places we went, the bathrooms were not super inclusive. So we did a lot of giving feedback about bathroom inclusion as well as person first language and how to use that with people with disabilities. I think especially in Lake George where there's a high tourist population, that seems to be the two main focuses for people, was how to make people feel socially included and also use the facilities.
Okay. So yeah, my next picture shows that I know all four of you saw a lot of bathrooms. And I know that after a while that probably did get a little crazy. So you can only see so many bathrooms. What we did, and I can actually have Deanna and Mary talk more about this if they'd like, but we through the ANCA project we assessed over 200 non-state operated recreation sites, and then simultaneously as this project unfolded, another project started where the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center was assessing state-operated sites, and so we did quite a few state-operated sites, and by the end of this coming year we'll have done over 400 state-operated sites. So it's quite a large number of sites, and for each site that was assessed, it was using the inclusivity assessment tool, and that tool looks at physical inclusion of what we call deal breakers. And so obviously that includes the bathrooms. It's sort of what are the essential elements of a recreation amenity that people need access to be able to enjoy that particular recreation environment. And so that it's not every aspect of the environment, but the key things that people need to be able to use to have a good recreation experience. And so the physical inclusion looked at parking and entrances and registration or check-in areas, bathrooms, elevators, stairs, some real basic things. And then any of the specialty recreation amenities at that agency. So it might be a bowling alley or a theater or a state park or a campground, or we would have various specialty checklists that would collect information about the physical attributes of those environments. And then the inclusivity assessment tool also asks about administrative practices, and Deanna mentioned, policies for things like service animals or person first language. And then program practices, what kinds of programming practices and adaptive equipment are put in place or are available for people to participate. So we use that tool, the inclusivity assessment tool, and as a result of doing that inclusivity assessment, we're able then to give some feedback to each of the assessed sites on what kinds of things they could do, what kind of tips could we give to help be more usable to all people that would want to use that site. And so I don't know, Deanna, if you want to say anything about the reports, or Mary, I'll unmute you. You wrote quite a few reports, so I'll just... Any feedback on those, either of you?
At least for me, the reports were fairly repetitive. As Mary said, a lot of times bathrooms, it was giving recommendations on how to make the accessible stall wider. Sometimes it was just, if there were multiple stalls within the restroom, taking down one of the dividers between the stalls and taking out one of the toilets, or just expanding out the stall to take up maybe the far wall of the bathroom. I definitely tried to do reports that were more feasible for the location instead of saying completely tear down your building and make a new one. It was more, this is what you have here right now. This is an easy way to make it a little more accessible. So instead of having a knob on the sink that you have to grab onto to turn, try to get a lever for the sink and those sorts of things.
I would agree with Deanna. I think when we spoke with people during interviews, we did a lot of baby steps. And then when we wrote the actual reports, Tyler and I did a lot of here's the little things that you can do. And if you're dreaming big, here are some other options for you. That was pretty much, got good feedback that way.
All right, thank you, both of you. And so that was a lot of feedback that went back to sites. And so that was a really great process to, move, I guess, the recreation system in the North Country along the path to more inclusivity. The other thing that happened with that data is we were and are entering it into the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center's online recreation database. And then we're linking it with the North Guide, which is sort of the recreation amenities database that ANCA is sponsoring and developing. And so it was interesting timing, I think, for both organizations, and I can maybe let Jake talk a little bit about this too, but for the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center, we are in the throes of rebuilding and strengthening our database so it's much more user-friendly and robust, and it's also going to be available for people who are doing the assessments to immediately enter the data from a mobile device or their phone or whatever right into the database. So we've made the process much more streamlined than when we first started this project. So because of building the database, it's quite a huge task, and I know Jake might agree with this. So we are really literally just about ready to launch our brand new database within the next week or so. We're getting to that point finally. And I don't know, Jake, if you'd want to say anything about the North Guide.
Sure, yeah. So the North Guide, it's an online database mainly focused at highlighting the arts and cultures and foods of the Adirondack North Country, museums, natural history museums. So yeah, great. As you see on that slide there, what we're going to do with our database is just link directly to the report at the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center database. Why create the wheel? So as she said, is great timing. We're ramping this up and they're completing their project. So looking forward to connect potential tourists directly to the reports and get great information.
Great, thank you. And I mean, they're both the North Guide is just a wonderful resource for people visiting the North Country, and now they'll have that extra. And I don't know if you can see in the slide, there's our little Inclusive Rec icon down in the entry for the Wild Center. This is just an example out of the North Guide database. So if I happen to have a disability or some other functional difference, and I'm like, wow, I'd really like to know a little bit more about what's there for inclusion or accessibility, instead of the North Guide having to recreate all that information, it'll just be a link right into the entry in the Inclusive Rec database that has all of that accurate and specific information about inclusion and accessibility. So I think it's going to be really a wonderful resource for all kinds of families and visitors to the North Country, that they'll be able to have, so much more information. I know when we were first starting out the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center, we did focus groups around the state of New York and heard a lot of stories from families about the hoops and the things they'd have to jump through to get the information they needed to decide whether or not they could visit a particular amenity, to the point where they would literally ask people on the phone, will you go walk into wherever it is I'm trying to learn about and describe to me what's there, because it matters, what it's like for that particular person and the type of wheelchair they use or whatever. So I think what this partnership will do is just bring a rich resource to lots of families and groups of friends that want to recreate in the North Country and get that information. So I think it's just a really great resource. So one thing that we wanted to do as a result of doing these hundreds of assessments was sort of look at what seemed to be the recurring themes what were Deanna and Mary and Tyler and Ben writing about over and over back to these recreation agencies that could help them increase their usability for all visitors. And from that data, from all of those hundreds of assessments, we kind of gleaned out what we call our top 10 list, or top 10 tips to increase usability for people wanting to use a recreation amenity. And so I thought I'd share with you briefly those top 10 tips. And then what I'll show you how we put it together into a guide that's available that you could disseminate broadly if you want as well. And so the first thing, and I think Mary mentioned this already, was the idea of that people are people first. And as a part of that we use person first language. And so I think, first of all, this idea that people with disabilities are your friends and your neighbors, are just people, and that disability is just one part of who they are. And so just getting kind of around that scary label of disability and just focusing on people with a functional difference was a really great way to sort of break down some barriers that are more attitudinal, and really those barriers being based on just fear of the unknown. When you start to really recast people as people, it becomes a lot less scary and a lot easier to start to think about how can I change what I do to be more inclusive of people of all abilities. And as a part of that is the idea of using person-first language. And so basically, when you talk about people, it's people first and then the disability. So it's not the disabled, but it's a person with a disability, or people with a disability. It's not the autistic child, it's a child with autism. So giving people, information on how to use person-first language. And, a real key part of that is sort of abolishing the word handicapped, which has sort of historic, archaic, and stigmatizing roots, and moving to the more, I guess, modern or kind of contemporary language of using accessible instead of handicapped. So not handicap parking, but accessible parking, or even reserved parking. So person-first language, I think, was a key thing that was repeated over and over throughout the reports. And interesting, in the state of New York, I guess it's been in existence now maybe 5 years, we actually have a state law that any state agency must use person-first language. So it's actually something we need to be doing anyway. Another tip is, just the way we communicate with the market or the audience that we communicate with. So the first tip there was really just using plain language, and there's a whole movement to really make language clear and simple and concise. And so just giving people some tips on how to make your literature, your website, anything where you're conveying information to people in the simplest, most crisp way that you can, using pictures or symbols to help give the information in additional ways besides just words, and laying things out in ways that words don't overwhelm people. And then making sure that the signage that you have at your recreation site is accessible, that it includes symbols or pictures, that it includes raised lettering and clear wording and Braille. And then last, to communicate clearly, just having alternative forms of communication available, whether it's things in large print, or assistive listening devices, or methods to line up a sign language interpreter, or closed captioning on any media that you use. All those kinds of alternative forms of communication, many which are easy and inexpensive to put into place. So that was another tip that we gave a lot. A third tip had to do with marketing and outreach. So, kind of who do you invite to come to your recreation facility or your recreation business? So, kind of asking people to take a look at, when you look at your advertisements or your brochures, if I have a disability, would I see myself in any pictures or images that are in your marketing materials? because that's what's going to help me feel invited. And then a simple practice of having an inclusion point of contact. Somebody designated at the recreation business that can help people that have a difference or a disability kind of negotiate what they need to be able to be a visitor or a customer there. So an inclusion point of contact is really sort of the one-stop shop that you have on your staff of a person who can coordinate, not do everything with inclusion, but help make sure everything happens clearly and easily for a customer. And then also, is your website accessible? Can people with vision impairments, can people with learning differences use your website? And so in the guide that we put together, we actually give a simple checklist of some things you can do to look at your website for your recreation business to make sure that it is usable by a lot of people or all people. Another tip, and I think you heard this with and the bathrooms are a part of this, but can people get around in a recreation site or facility? And so that idea of a clear path of travel was something that it's kind of a basic building block of being able to use a recreation site. And so basically, is it an unobstructed, well-lit, wide, firm and stable, and gradual incline route of travel? That would allow somebody to be able to approach, enter, and use a facility. So you can see in the two pictures I have on the top here, this isn't just about disability, but it's really about everybody. Because if there's obstructions in the pathway, it keeps a lot of people out or makes it difficult for people to use your particular recreation business. So that idea of a clear path of travel from first approaching the recreation business to actually entering and using it was a tip that we gave to a lot of people. And related to that was just making space. And so we gave a lot of basic dimensions for accessibility to people. In fact, we developed a sort of a cheat sheet of here's the basic dimensions to look for throughout your facility, particularly at your registration area or your ticket counter or in the bathrooms, that, people need to be able to get around and to move. And so something as simple as, is there a 60-inch circle to negotiate the bathroom stall, because that's the wheelchair turning radius is 60 inches. What's the typical reach of a person who's sitting? What's the kind of the space needed for somebody using a cane as they negotiate through your facility? So one of the tips that we gave was really sort of these basic building blocks of making space, so that people with functional differences were able to negotiate and use that space. And in particular, the spaces that were critical deal breakers, like bathrooms and ticket counters. And then another tip that we provided was really just to step back and think about universal design. Because if you think in the framework of how can I design this recreation environment so people of all sizes, shapes, and abilities can use it, then I know that it's going to be something that invites all people in. And those basic principles of universal design have been around for a while now, and they really just say, you know what, people aren't all the same. We're not all the same size. So how can we create a recreation environment or service or space so that all of us in all our variations are able to use it? So whether we need to rest more often, or whether we need a ramp instead of stairs, or whether we need more simple information, whatever that variation might be, how can we apply these principles of universal design to our recreation site? So that's another piece of information that we gave as far as tips and tools, is just what those principles of universal design are. And they're really a way of thinking about, especially if you're remodeling or changing or adding on to or building new, they are should be sort of at the forefront of your planning process. Another tip we gave was using policies and procedures, clearly written, and staff that know about them and are trained on them and are in use, that help you invite and include all people. And I think Deanna said this, that one of the areas of policy that came up quite a bit was the use of service animals. The other was using mobility devices, and then personal care attendants. And so we, in the Improving Usability for All Visitors Public Awareness Guide, we actually give some sample examples of policies that are from actual facilities on, here's how you could frame your policy about service animals, so that people know and your staff know what's allowed and who's welcomed. Another tip we saw was just, making sure that the customers using your recreation business are included and are supported. And so sort of this framework to think about that is, well, who is this customer that wants to come and use my recreation business? And what are the demands of the activity or the environment where I provide my recreation service? And if there's a difference between the two, if there's some sort of gap, then what could we put into place to be able to bridge that gap so that person can participate? And bridging the gap can be anything from adaptive equipment to changing the skills to maybe moving the space you do an activity, to changing the rules, to figuring out a part of the activity that person could do. Maybe it's not the whole activity. So in the guide, we give some suggestions for how to bridge that gap. And I always like to put a plug-in at this point for handyhelp.net, which is located in the North Country near Lafargeville. I think I'm saying that right. Rich Bobband is the founder and sort of the genius behind handyhelp.net. He, I would call him an inventor. He uses a wheelchair, and he is an avid outdoor recreationist. And as a result of his disability, wanted to continue to be an avid outdoor recreationist, and so has invented all kinds of adaptive equipment and come up with a lot of creative strategies to make recreation environments more available to people. And so I'd encourage you to check out his website. It's actually been translated into several languages, and he blogs on the Christopher Reeves Foundation website and has had lots of requests for his patterns and designs. And he can help you if you have something you're trying to adapt. He would be a really helpful person. He not only can think from a user's perspective, but he also loves to come up with the cheapest way possible to do something. So he always teases me. In my work, I teach here at SUNY Cortland and the therapeutic recreation curriculum, and the students learn how to use and make adaptive equipment. And so I purchased some adaptive fishing equipment to give, so the students could, use it and learn about it. And it was $200 for this piece of equipment. And Rich teases me because he made the exact same piece of equipment for 50 cents. So it's kind of his joke on me that, really a lot of the adaptive equipment is it really just takes this, thought process of bridging the gap. What can the person do? What do we need to do to bridge the gap to the activity? And then another key tip that we gave a lot was this idea of supporting each customer, that each person who comes to our recreation environments has a different level of tolerance for the noise and the activity and, sort of what they can handle as far as, the social support that they might need. And so a best practice to help support each customer is to somewhere in that recreation environment provide a quiet space. And it might just be a quiet corner in the, off the lobby, or an unused office that could be made comfortable in a calming place for people. Or it might be that you advertise times when your recreation business is quieter. So you can see this is an example from a museum, and they let it, be widely known that here's the less busy times if you're looking for a less stimulating environment. Or it might be that you have staff or volunteers that you can call in to help support somebody to be at the recreation environment. Rich was actually on campus guest speaking with my students recently, and when I think about Rich, I don't think of somebody who's looking for a quiet space. I think of maybe a child with autism that might need that quiet space. But Rich was telling me him and his wife recently went to, I might have been the Final Four, some of the basketball games in Syracuse, and at one point the noise and the stimulation of that experience was just so much for him that he went and found a quiet space. So it's all of us that kind of need that at some point. And then the last tip, and maybe the most important one, is about the staff that are working for you at your recreation business, that they truly are the ambassadors and, are really what can make or break how welcoming your environment is and how inclusive it is. And I really love this quote. This is actually a quote from one of the people in our focus groups. You can have the most beautiful ramps and shiny new automatic doors, but if your staff's not welcoming and friendly, I'm not bringing my son to your facility. I mean, it really does make the difference on somebody wanting to come or not to be a customer at your business. And so, just the idea of how do you hire staff and how do you train staff in particular, is inclusion and disability awareness and person first language a part of your training? So those are some of the key things that we talked about. So the public awareness guide is what we produced as a result of these tips, and they're all kind of in one place. We've sent this guide out to all the sites that were assessed. We deliver, I think ANCA has quite a few copies that they'll be distributing or have distributed around the North Country. It's online as a PDF on the ANCA website and on the Inclusive Rec website. And then I'm not sure if my link is going to work. No, but I was going to show you that I'm also working on putting it up as a flip book. So maybe at the end I'll pull that up if we have a little bit more time. Yeah, so that's basically what we've been doing over the last 2 years. And I think what's next, and I'm going to unmute Jake again and Deanna and Mary, so if anybody wants to add in fact, I could unmute anybody. Why don't I unmute everybody? And we can just talk here a little bit about, I'm just figuring out how to unmute. There we go. Sort of what the future is, but I think what I would say from the perspective of the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center is that we want to get all the linkages done between the North Guide and our new database, and so that's kind of a priority, so that all that information that was collected is readily available to people. And then as we're working on launching Inclusion U Online in a real user-friendly public format, so I'd love to see more people from the North Country, from anybody in the network that ANCA works with, to go through Inclusion U Online and become a CIA or Certified Inclusivity Assessor and do more assessments and get even more amenities in the recreation database, so that there's even more linkages possible and more information out there. So that's kind of what I see as some future directions. I don't know if Jake, if you'd want to add anything, or Deanna or Mary, but we do. Mary is still actually entering the last of the assessments, because we were in the process of converting to our new database. We had to kind of stop entering assessments as we migrated data. So I think Mary's still working on sort of the last of those, getting all those in the database. But Jake, anything you would want to add as far as future directions? I know you might want to talk about the diversity initiative now.
Yeah, I don't know. Is Pete Nelson still on the line, and is he unmuted?
I just unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds great.
Yes.
Wonderful. I'll just take 30 seconds here. The Diversity Advisory Council has fired up and is gathering affiliates and is doing training in the park and is trying to do, I think, what you're trying to do here, which is raise awareness and change the way we talk about diversity and inclusion. Obviously, everything that you've talked about today is of a piece with what we're doing. And I think that people who are differently abled, people who have a variety of disabilities, and people who are aging are all part of the tapestry that we want the Adirondacks to serve better, support better, and include better. And I really appreciate that you brought up both sides of the coin. It is the right thing to do, but it's also the sensible thing to do economically from a business standpoint. So that's what we're after, and I have a feeling that we'll have many opportunities to be allies with you and to work together on projects. We're just beginning a long journey, and we're really, really excited by it.
That sounds really, really great. And if I could ask a couple questions, Pete, are you involving like a lot of different agencies and recreation businesses and in the council or the initiative? Is it quite a large network of groups and people?
Yes, it's growing. Again, I think we're really at the beginning. It began with a symposium last August that was well attended, but it's grown rapidly, and our affiliates, affiliate organizations that work with us and support us and take on projects in conjunction with us span the park already. Everybody from Roost to Cap 21. We have training sessions that have begun, and those are also being done with a park-wide focus. The first training piece that Jake attended was at the Wild Center. There's another one on gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender inclusion. That workshop is on May 16th, also at the Wild Center, and that invites for that are being brought out region-wide. But we're also going to do training in various different parts of the park. We really see it as a North Country issue. Although we have an Adirondack Park focus. So we're trying to cast a very broad net, and the response so far has been tremendous. We really feel like there's momentum and people understand how important it is to start talking about this and raise awareness.
That sounds really exciting and really positive, so that's awesome. I just put up the last slide here if you wanted to check out any of the websites. The Adirondack North Country Association website and the North Guide website. I gave both of them. And then the Inclusive Rec web address, which we're, as I mentioned, still in the throes of migrating and changing things over. So it's still going to our old, what I call our old website, but by May 1st, it should be switched over to our new website. So I'd encourage you to check that out, and would welcome any feedback on our new format for our database once it's there. If you want to check that out, I would love some feedback. So,
just to follow up on that, Lynn, too, just to let everybody know that the North Guide, we're still finalizing our last pieces too, and linking the Inclusive Rec pages. So not everything's up there yet, but it will be. So I think we're going to both come together around March 1st or May 1st as our finalizing kind of step.
That sounds great. I mean, I guess I've learned the hard way how much a database is a huge amount of work. So it takes more time than you ever expected. I did, if you don't mind, I wanted to share with you, I'm going to share my desktop just for a minute, and I just wanted to share with you it's okay. I wanted to share with you the flip book that I'm working with the group so I can minimize this, right? I'm getting help from Amy here. So I think you're all going to be able to see this, but this is what the flip book looks like. So it'll be kind of like a book instead of a flat PDF file. So kind of fun, and that's something that we can put on all our websites. Anybody that wants to link it up once I get it up is welcome to do that. So
it's just a little bit of lag time, so it hasn't shown it yet.
Oh, okay. I guess there's some lag time, so I better slow down.
So it's still.
Oh, okay.
It's like
So
5 seconds behind.
Oh, okay, so I'll just give it a minute to kind of catch up so you can see what I just did.
Mhm.
Should be getting there. It's quite slow.
It is.
While that's loading, I'll just see if anybody else has any other comments or questions or ideas.
Lynn, this is Jake again. Sorry, I just received an email from Mark. He's on the webinar, but unfortunately, due to his equipment, he's not able to speak. But he just wanted to thank everybody for the excellent work and an important project. And that's Mark Woods at the Department of Transportation and Scenic Byways program.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like the funding went to really good use and there were some really positive outcomes from it, and I think maybe some long-lasting ones. Not just, the information we collected and we'll be able to share between our two organizations, but I think just the work that Mary and Deanna and Ben and Tyler did, just talking to and educating many, many recreation business owners and people who manage recreation amenities, even at the state level. I think it was really awesome. So now you can see the flip book, I think. You can kind of get a sense of what that's like. So I'll go back to the front. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more alive than the flat PDF copy, but we also have multiple copies available for that. So I'm going to have Amy help me get back into this here.
Okay. Yep, click on your link.
Right here. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I'll just put the PowerPoint back up so you can see those web addresses again. Just open it. Sorry.
I'll click on it can't go to and pick.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm just figuring out how to get the presentation back up. So, all right. Well, so Amy had typed a message that we will have the webinar recording up on the Inclusive Recreation YouTube video channel, and so I will send a link out to everybody once I get that up there. So feel free to share it with anybody you think might be interested. And then also, if you would like a printed copy of the Improving Usability for All Visitors Guide, we have some here at the Inclusive Recreation Resource Center, and Jake has some at ANCA, so you could email either of us to get one sent out to you. I think that would be, we'd love to get those out, spread far and wide. And so, anything else from anybody? I just want to thank Jake and Deanna and Mary for contributing, and you too, Pete. And it was fun to try this, and thanks to Amy for the moral support sitting here next to me on our first ever webinar from SUNY Cortland. So thank you, everybody. Have a
Nice
great
job.
day.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Have a great day.
Yep. You're still